Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Whisper Louder. I'm your host, Alyssa Smith, and today I'm bringing you part two of last week's episode where I was joined with our first guest, Edward Backer, as we laid the foundation on the importance of connecting with others, whether it's platonic, familial, or romantic. So, in this episode, we will dive a little deeper as we learn that ultimately God is the key ingredient to them all. And the best way we as Gen Zers can show up and represent is being our true, authentic self. So, let's get into it. Here is Connections and Complexities, Part 2. Pursuing our identity and the life that God has called us to be, becoming whole, becoming healthy, like you were mentioning, it does also involve the mind, but it doesn't just make your life and connections better. It allows you to love God and to love others better. And that matters immensely because people matter, you matter, your friends matter. In God's view, people's hearts and minds are the most precious things and they need to be handled with care. And so, even starting from a young age, whether it's middle school, high school, college, learning and practicing building relationships with your friends and in your community, it sets the preface of when you get older and you're connecting with other people, whether it's at your job or in college or wherever you may be at a social event. Knowing who you are reflects how you relate to other people. So I think you kind of already went over a little bit, but would you say like your experience with connecting with people in your life, it had its ups and downs? Like what would you like say on that for you
Absolutely.
personally?
Oh, absolutely. Connection is it's been a wild ride. It's been a roller coaster. Like I mentioned, like I'm an only child. So having two working parents and not any siblings. Um, Also, I went to a school where the students were coming from all. I live on. I think you mentioned earlier. Like I live on Long Island, right? Uh, Maybe an island is 4 hours long or so. A lot of towns and everything. The school I went to, it was such that students were bussed in from all these different towns. In my town in particular, um, there weren't a lot of kids there, especially in my age. And so all these factors combined, I'll be honest, I grew up with a kind of lonely childhood. My only interactions with other kids my age were at school, and if not at school, it was at church. But coming home, spent a lot of time alone, and so something I see looking back on my childhood is that I I don't know if maybe I was just always this person or I developed this, um, in spite of being alone. But I was someone who enjoyed making other people laugh. Um, I enjoyed making friends, with the new kids, or obviously the kids who were already there. Um, I just enjoyed being around other people and making connections and finding meaning in meaning something to them. You know, um, like who was I to them? Was I someone that brought them joy? Was that someone who they wanted around? I found like purpose and value in that. And life has its ups and downs. Like that included his ups and downs, and that's something I see like in high school too. When I went to high school, transferred there for sophomore year to senior year. Sophomore year was a definite struggle because I went from a small school with kids I know my whole life to suddenly a public school with no one I knew. Um, and it was really hard to get to know people, especially because they had already grown up with each other, right? I mean, these are all kids from my town, but I had never met like 99.9% of them. Um, and so it's hard to make friends when there are these established friend groups. But God blessed, He provided friends in that sophomore year. It was a really lonely time in my life, but I made a lot of great friends. Got involved in some, got on sports and some clubs and such. Built connections that way. So that was, a blessing, that a hill high that He brought me out of a low. College, similar thing, although it was better because I was a bit more matured and grown up then. God brought me through that. Now I'm here at Southern and I'm in an Adventist environment. I have a better idea of what Adventism means to me, what God means to me, what my relationship with Him looks like. And I am now finding it so much easier to connect with other people because of that, because my identity is more solidified than it was prior. But like each of these experiences, I look back in my life, while I did go through these lows and have these issues with connecting with people for various reasons, they were all instrumental in growing my identity, not just generally speaking, but also in Him and my trust in Him. Because if I'm trusting in God with, oh, God, you know who I am, you know who I'm supposed to be. That's another thing. What are we supposed to be? We come up with ideas of like, oh, I want to be an astronaut. I want to be a doctor when I grow up. When I was a kid, I want to be a train conductor. I'll be honest, that was the first thing I wanted to be. Right? But like, while some people are blessed in the sense that they know who they want to be from from 3 years old to career, a lot of us we change. We change from thing to thing to thing because we're growing, we're getting new experiences, finding out what we like and what we don't. um yeah, that complicates things as well. But God, He knows exactly who we're meant to be, right? What we're meant to do. And He's trying to lead us. So when we trust Him and trust Him with who we are, with our identity, then no matter what trials we go through, what lows and issues we have with connections, we will always find ourselves in a better place because He's leading us to that better place always. I don't know if that answered the question.
Mm. Oh, yeah, for sure. I definitely can relate to that just in a little
Hmm.
different way. Navigating from that experience to being homeschooled was hard for me because then there was this loneliness that started building up inside and not seeing friends and not hanging out and just like having random chats between classes. So it did make it harder to relate to people getting older because of all the switching and the environment. And for me, even still being a little bit shy, I needed people around me to bring that out. And so it was kind of similar experience, though I wasn't a single child. I still loved having people around me. And I think also tying into connecting with others, that's such a big necessity. God intended us to have
Hmm.
relationships because that's the biggest way of showing His connection to us, His reason why He created us. And so I think as children of God, our relationship with Jesus is the foundation for every relationship. One thing that I remember seeing, I think it actually was on Pinterest. I love
Me too.
Pinterest.
Me too.
But I remember reading and it said relationships nowadays, especially in this generation, even the generation that's supposed to like that's coming up now, their generation is gonna have such a different experience than us Gen Zers. We still were able to see the olden days now and a little bit of
Hmm.
future. So we have kind of a bit of a balance of knowing how things used to be and how things are now. But nowadays, it's kind of like it's hard to see the love for one
Yeah.
another. And relationships, some of the time, people don't feel connected with each other. They feel unseen, they feel misunderstood, and they feel lonely in whatever
Yeah.
relationship they're in. And like you mentioned earlier, it's because it's become that give and take mentality and not a I'm gonna do this for you because I love
Hmm.
you, especially with the new um, technologies and all the like nice things out there that people feel they have to get into or buy or have to be seen as valuable or like I'm you know hip or whatever. All of those things are external. So at the end of the day, those things aren't going to have any value with just things that you know are going to be thrown away eventually because you can't throw people away. You can throw material things away, but you can't throw
Yeah.
people away. People are going to always
Yeah.
be there. So I would rather have someone who's going to stay and be there for me than something who's just going to give me instant gratification for what a year or two and then move on to the next thing. I want to experience true connection with people, and I don't want to settle for less than that. And I think society has become so loose with
Mhm.
that because it's all about themselves.
When you were speaking about your childhood, um, and going from being surrounded from so many kids and having that constant interaction to suddenly not, right? And how like uh, contrasting and kind of like jarring that can be, and then that is. It reminded me of a sermon that one of my favorite pastors over here, Pastor Horton. Sermon title was "The Origin of Community," and his focus in the Bible was on Genesis 2 verses 18 to 24, where this is the part where God is introducing woman into the world, right? Eve into to Adam, and women completed God's design. And then Pastor went into more explanation of that. But like the next thing I have written for that is lawlessness equals sin. And I remember what the pastor was saying was the goal of the enemy um, at this point in the Bible, right? I mentioned this earlier in the episode, is isolation, right? Because if he can destroy community, if Satan wants us to feel isolated and without community, because community is God's final creation, right? It's not just it's not just among his first creations, but it's also his final creation. But to reside with him, to have community with him forever, that's the final creation. But Satan wants to destroy that. He doesn't want us to experience that connection, that community. And so he wants us to be isolated. So things get in the way of that. These conflicts, these contrasts, you work together to overcome them. And by doing so, you build connection. You build relation with each other. But people are so focused on themselves. Again, going back to individualistic society, people are so focused on themselves, what they can get out of this relationship, that when these conflicts come to pass, there's no resolution, there's no reconciliation, because what good does that do me? While the saying goes, the grass is greener on the other side, it's not. It just looks that way, right? It's all about perspective. The grass is only greener where you water it. That's why we have sprinklers, right?
Mm.
That's why we water our plants, our flowers. We want them to grow. We don't just look at the flowers at the store and be like, wow, I could have that. You see this beautiful bouquet? I could have that 24/7 the rest of my life. And it'll look this way all the time. No, it won't. It'll only look this way if you nurture it, if you take care of it, if you water it, if you sacrifice your time to take care of it, right? Because that's the only way that any relationship, whether it's platonic, whether it's romantic, whether it's familial, that's the only way that any relationship can work, any connection can work, any community can be built, is if you are willing to sacrifice part of yourself, right, to take care of it, to nurture it. Growth without pain means nothing. You won't have learned from it. When we get something in our lives easy, you can think of whatever. Um, when something comes easy to you, Do you value it? No. Because where was the conflict? Where was the battle? How did you fight for it? Let's say this couple is going on a trip. Are they going to remember more so the destination, getting there, like what happens once they arrive, or are they also going to remember what their journey was, what the road trip was, right? The music that they listened to, the conversations that they had, the things that they saw, things that they talked about the conversation. They're gonna remember, yeah, the destination. Yeah, they're gonna find joy in getting to their destination. But they're gonna remember what's be really impactful is how they got there, right? The memories that they made along the way. That's what we should really be focusing on, is the quality of connection and building that, as opposed to just being focused on becoming married, on finding that person. How about you become that person first? How about you how about you water your relationship, yeah, you nurture your relationship and nurture them, right? Because they're the same as you. They're growing. We think about our parents, right? Think about our childhoods. Oh, my dad was hard on me this way. My mom, she didn't really know. She didn't really understand me when I was young. Just examples, right? Things that people can say. But we forget our parents are living life for the first time too, right? They're trying to figure this out just like us. They don't know what's going on. They don't know what the next day is going to hold. They're trying to stay afloat for their sake and for ours, right? For a relationship, we got to focus not on ourselves, but on nurturing the relationship, nurturing the other person. Because when we nurture the other person and they are nurturing us, we both get nurtured, right? But we're doing it in a way that connects us, as opposed to nurturing myself and her nurturing herself. Where's the connection? We're just focused on self.
So many good points. Yeah. Looking on the growth and the nurturing, like you mentioned, on that road trip, on that journey, you look back on more on what you experienced. What were those high points in your life? What were those conversations? What were those moments that you spent with people, with your loved ones? You look back on that and you saw how you changed, how you grew into the person that you are now, who you are today. That has much more of an impact than just the
Absolutely.
destination. The destination is like the cherry on top, but how about all the other
Exactly.
ingredients? All the other things that you had to
Exactly.
gather, that you had to add in, you know, taste, feel, experience, and you mentioned the relation to romantic relationships and just like a little bit discussing that a little bit. In your opinion, like in our generation, what is your outlook on relationships and building connection
Mhm.
with people on a romantic level and then on a
Right.
friend
I
level?
think it's really interesting. Um, so on a friend level, right? Platonically, um, I think it's quite easy. Ooh, actually, oh mercy. Um, no, it's just like thinking about this as a question. There's just so many different paths I could take to answer, and they wouldn't all necessarily end at the same destination. But I'll
So it'll be your top, like the first that would
right,
come to
right.
your
I think
mind.
it's really easy to build surface level connections and trick yourself into thinking they are, or masquerade them as deep connection.
Wow. And that happens a lot in our
I would say
generation.
so. It's easy for people to associate with each other, but not have a deep friendship because they're not maybe willing to be vulnerable, um, or maybe their like lifestyles conflict, um, and instead of addressing that and seeing like where they can agree, where they can like kind of move forward together in this friendship, um, they'll just kind of pretend like they accept this person, for who they want to live their life as. When in reality, they don't agree at all, but they won't say that, right? So I guess my point is people in our generation, from what I have observed, at least around me and like on social media, is that honesty and integrity, true honesty and integrity, it does not always exist in these friendships. Because if you're not willing to say what you think or say what you feel to someone that you care about, to your friend, they ask you a question or they're doing something that maybe is harmful to their lives, whether it be to their body or to their future or mind, whatever. And if you're not honest about it in a loving way, you just let them do whatever they want to do. Are you really their friend? Because do you really care about them? If you care about someone, you're going to do everything that you can in a way that still respects them and respects yourself, everything that you can to help them thrive, help them stay safe. Sorry?
Mhm. Help them be a better version of
Precisely.
themselves.
Precisely. But if there's no honesty, and if you're going to stand there and say, "Oh yes, absolutely, I agree with this," when you really don't, then you're destroying your own integrity because you're going against you personally you believe against what you're doing and what they're doing. So if there's no honesty and integrity, there's no relationship. Not really. So there's a lot of surface level relationships that exist um, because of this, because people are sacrificing their honesty and integrity for the sake of maybe conforming, for the sake of having connection. For if they're a person that struggles with connecting with others, then they may be sacrificing their honesty and integrity just for the sake of having a connection, something that they can say that they have that they didn't before, right? And that's damaging. That's really damaging. Um, on a personal level and on a relational level. Because and now this moves into the second part of your question. Um, a relationship, a strong relationship, especially now, it isn't always the case, or this doesn't always need to be the case. But it's it's great, I will say, if a romantic relationship can be based off of a friendship, right? Um,
Yeah.
no matter how long that friendship is. But it's great because when with a romantic relationship, let's say as Christians, right, we have the typically we have the goal anyway of becoming married. Now, not everyone will get married, whether of their own choice or other circumstances, and that's okay, right? That's totally fine. But like, let's say you do want to get married, you want to. It's a good idea to become friends first, right? Because when you can interact in a way that you are not trying to perform or put on a facade of who you really are, then you can both see, oh, this is who they are around other people. This is who they are with me. This is who they are alone. When they're not trying to look a certain way, when they're not trying um, to achieve a certain a goal result, right? And if that's something that if you find out, oh, the way that this person acts and lives, whatever, is something I can agree with, something I can see myself living with. Okay, great, start a romantic relationship. Um, but like, I think your question was like, what one are the what's like the biggest like issue with connection I see among like Gen Zers with these two things. I would say at the root of both of them, honesty and integrity. Honesty and integrity. Because again, we go back to one of the reasons why romantic relationships will end because you're holding this protection, um, this guard, right? This facade. So if you don't, if you're willing to put that aside and show each other who you really are, then you can work from a place together to grow. But I don't see that. Not every day anyway.
Yeah. And it really just all boils down to
Yeah.
vulnerability, which also is one of the
Yes.
biggest things.
Yes.
It's hard to be vulnerable with anyone because of you feel like you want to protect your feelings, you want to protect
Hmm.
your heart. And so you put up this barrier of everything that you really feel, and you kind of just go out there and, hi and hello, like developing very surface level connections when really everyone deep down wants to have a true connection
Mhm.
with someone, wants to know that there's someone that they can relate to and not feel ashamed or be afraid, showing the real person, showing that real side of them. Because so many people have opinions and judgments and ideas that get all bottled up inside of you and in your mind. And you're like, well, I don't want to show this side because it seems like that's not what people want to
Mm.
see. So let me put a cover over it when really you're not, no one is getting inside that bubble. It's just,
Right.
they're just bouncing off of you.
Something I forgot I wanted to add to the romantic relationship part, but connects to what you were just saying, is something I see, and I know you're gonna be like, yep, situationships.
Ooh, that's another
Yeah.
topic.
Now listen, I wasn't alive 50 years ago. I was not. I don't know if situationships were a concept, or was a concept rather, that existed,
I feel like we made
50
that.
years ago, 30 years ago, whatever. But I see it today. That much I do. And I know a lot of people in situationships. And personally, I don't agree with them. I don't agree with the concept of situationship. Honestly, I don't really even understand it completely because it's baffling to me. Um, but what I have seen in some people's situationships in their lives is that there's this fear of, like you're mentioning, intimacy, vulnerability, right? Being true and honest with who you are to another person. Um, there's this fear of that vulnerability and of the unknown. What is fear? Fear is just not knowing what's going to happen next, right? Or I mean, that's anxiety, I guess, worrying about what's going to happen next. But fear is on a similar lane, right? It has to do with the unknown. It has to, because you're not allowing yourself to move to this next level, this more intimate, vulnerable level with this person, because, well, it can be for any reason, but fear is a common one. Fear of what could happen next. Fear of maybe some sort of trauma that you've experienced, right? And not wanting to risk that again. But what is love? Love is a risk. If God loved us, John 3:16, right? For God so loved the world that He gave His only begotten Son. Whoever believes in Him, should not perish but have eternal life. God loved us, so He took a risk. Yeah, I mean, God also knows how things are going to turn out, but choosing Him is a personal decision, right? We have the freedom to do so, free will. But so He took a risk with us by sacrificing His Son out of love to give us that choice. Love is a risk. You have to decide if it's worth it's worth taking that risk. If this person is worth taking that risk for, right? But it all starts again with identity, knowing who you are, being comfortable with that, being comfortable with things not going your way, and having trust in God.
Wow, that was good. And I just want to end things off with a quote about relationship connecting. And ultimately, everyone's heart's desire is to know that someone out there wants to connect with them too. And the quote says, it's not about being known and admired by everyone. It's about being authentic in a world that makes us think we're not enough. Because authenticity connects us, and a genuine connection is what really heals. And so, for anyone who's listening, know that there are people in your circle who care about you, and that your worth, your value, the reason why you're here has purpose. And you don't have to make yourself someone else to be accepted because you're already accepted through Jesus Christ. So I want to thank y'all for joining this episode. Thank you, Ed, for speaking on here and coming on and sharing your
Absolutely, it was a
thoughts.
pleasure.
And if any listeners, if you're listening on YouTube and if you're listening on Spotify, hit that like button, subscribe, and comment below your thoughts or suggestions on this episode. Don't live for Jesus in private if he's called you to live for him in public. Always remember to whisper louder.